Hey, welcome to the Inward Investing Podcast. I'm Mike Ritter.
And I'm Todd Whelan.
And we have an awesome guest today. And he is joining us from all the way across the world, Marty Kendall, the founder of Nutrient Optimizer. Welcome, Marty.
Dude, yeah, from the future. Great to be here, guys.
What is it like in the future?
Oh, the irony of being Marty Kendall from the future. If anybody's seen Back to the Future, but anyway, no, it's awesome. You'll have to catch up.
Yes, awesome. We'll go over like all of the sports betting information we need to know.
That'd be great. Great idea.
As soon as we get off the air, though, so that no one else gets it, we want to capitalize on this. So like I said, you have a website called Nutrient Optimizer, and some people may be familiar with that, and some people, maybe they don't. But before we get into, I think, the meat of this conversation, tell us a little bit about your background. I know you're an engineer. How did you get into this? And maybe you don't have to go all the way back to childhood, but, what's your path?
I suppose civil engineering by day, like to use numbers, and I tend to, like people go, why do you use graphs? And I just sort of see things in graphs and want to optimize things and with numbers and charts. And my wife was telling the story yesterday. Our daughter's 15, and today, and when she was born, going back to the very start, I was graphing her contractions and saying, okay, now the next contraction should be here, and we're projecting when the baby's going to be born. But anyway, that was all part of it. My wife is a type 1 diabetic, and that's sort of the major impetus to go, okay, I can see how food influences her life, her quality of life, her blood sugars, her insulin requirements. How do I quantify that to try and optimize her quality of life through what she eats? So that was part of it. I came across the food insulin index and tried to manipulate that to say these are the foods that, hey, you should eat more of, and these are the foods you should eat less of. Then got to the point where, hey, that the food insulin index leads you to very high-fat foods to stabilize blood sugars, which is the whole low-carb keto thing, which is good for some people, but for myself, who's trying to lose weight and be more muscular and leaner, ideally, as we all probably want to do. Eating a whole lot of fat bombs all day to keep your blood sugars stable isn't ideal. And I suppose it's been a journey since then over the last 5 years or so, trying to find that optimal point for different people with different goals. So some people are trying to do therapeutic ketosis, some people are trying to get lean and jacked, and some people are trying to put on a lot of weight, and some people are trying to stabilize their blood sugars. And through all of that, they need to optimize the nutrient density so that they get satiated and they're energized and the mitochondria work more effectively and they can think and perform a whole lot better. So that's sort of the journey, is to continue to refine a system to help people find their unique nutritional approach to suit their goals. So that's been the journey. That's the thing that wakes me up really early every morning, and I try to quantify that. And recently we've developed the Nutrient Optimizer, which is a tool that helps people get into that channel, that funnel, and say, how do they move that forward for them to achieve their goal?
Now, I think there's a big difference between, wanting to help your wife or being very inquisitive yourself versus taking the step to create a website to help other people. What drove you to do that?
Yeah, I suppose initially it was like, I think I'm onto something here. I've got to share it. I've got to write it down. And as an engineer, you sort of write it down. And as you put it in writing, you go, okay, I understand it. It makes sense as a thesis by itself. And then I got it out there and people liked it. And, you get the dopamine hit from people reading it and giving you a good reassurance. And that just keeps them going. So I've just, I really love developing ideas around nutrition quantitatively and sharing them and getting them out there to make people think. And a lot of the people that I really like and respect out there have resonated with that and really reacted well. And that gives me a lot of buzz. But then the next step is, how do I take it out there to share it with the greater world, the wider world, who don't spend their days and nights dreaming about nutrition and how to optimize it and how to improve things. And I suppose I've got a bit of an anger and a bit of a frustration that people like my wife get such crap nutritional advice for so long, that if she'd only known that 30 years ago, what would her quality of life have been able to be I suppose there's a bit of an anger and a frustration to, how can we make this, accessible for the whole world so that they can actually, if they want to improve their nutrition to feel better and perform better, how can they do that in a simple way that they don't have to, they can dive into the deep end, but they don't have to. So yeah, that's the journey. That's the challenge each day, to try and simplify it and make it more accessible.
When did you realize you were really onto something? Was there a point where it just really clicked? Like, hey, this could really be something that I can create a career out of.
Yeah. I'm not sure about the career thing yet, to be honest. I definitely spend a lot of time each day, in all my spare time developing it. But yeah, it was like I think it was about 5 years ago, I came across Jason Fung, who was talking about the food insulin index and how that influenced things. And I dug back into the original research that looked at the food insulin index. And then I'd been getting into Matt Lalonde, who was talking about nutrient density, and I went, wow, this food insulin index is really important to help people like my wife and to help identify which foods are best and worst, and then to join that using multi-criteria analysis to optimize it with nutrient density. I went, wow, this is why hasn't anybody else thought of this? And oh my God, I think this is really important, and I'm going to get it out there. So yeah, that was sort of a bit of a moment back then. I was like trying to jump up and down and say to my wife, I think I've found something really important here. I was like, okay, cool. I think this could be a really big deal. And yeah, 5 years later, it has resonated with a lot of people. And when we do implement it, it works perfectly as designed. So it's like, oh, this is so good. Yeah.
It's really easy to use when somebody like me who can barely read can understand it and actually get something out of it. And, being halfway across the world, I mean, I can only hope that, whatever I'm developing has an influence to people, around the world. So I'm sure that has to be really cool. But there has to be, obviously, it's a great website, and I want to dig into the website a little bit here, but it's a great website. It's easy to use, but tell me how this has helped your wife. What have you seen specifically with her story that's helped her the most?
Yeah, just more and more as we took the journey into low carb, keto, and there's pros and cons of all of that, but and paleo, just her energy levels, her ability to, rather than just she's a teacher by day, trained teacher, but then all different aspects of type 1 diabetes, the anxiety, the fatigue, everything that comes with the fluctuations, the massive fluctuations of blood sugar. Leave her, she'd try to drop the kids off at school and come home and do a bit of work around the house and then nap for the afternoon till she could get up and go back and pick up the kids. And she was, not living life to her full potential and really quite exhausted. But as we've been able to dial it in more and more and more, she's just had so much more energy and vitality in life, and seen her personality come through more and more. And, all the complications that were starting to show and typically show with type 1 diabetes of living elevated blood sugars all the time, they've continued to improve more and more and more, and her eyesight's really good, and she doesn't have any complications, and blood sugar and HbA1c is fantastic. So she doesn't have perfect energy all the time, but it's probably 95% most of the time, and can live a really full life with the family. And yeah, she's thriving. It's really exciting, and that's reward enough in and of itself. But I suppose once you see that in your own family, trying to get it out there to share it with the world is the next step. And yeah.
What was some of the dietary advice she was getting?
I suppose it was just eat whatever you want to, eat what everybody else is eating, and then just inject to do that. And Dr. Bernstein talks about the law of small numbers, and basically small inputs in terms of food require smaller inputs in terms of insulin. So you just can't match in a normal healthy person with a working pancreas, let alone someone who's injecting exogenous insulin. You can't match that incoming food requirement for insulin with the actual insulin you're injecting. So the higher the carb and to some extent the protein boluses, the harder it is to manage those blood sugar swings. So by manipulating diet, you can stabilize the blood sugar swings, which just enables you to much more accurately nail the insulin dosing and get a much better blood sugar response. So, yeah.
What was a big turning point for her? What year was that?
Oh, wow. Yeah, it's been a bit of a journey probably over the last 7 years or so as I've got more and more into this. But there was a point where we met a friend, Troy Stapleton, in Brisbane at a low-carb conference, and he talked about this type 1 grit group based on the ideas of Dr. Bernstein, and we joined that, and we just saw these type 1s with amazingly stable blood sugars and these flatline blood sugars, and it's like, wow, this is a real thing. These kids are really thriving and doing incredibly well. Maybe I can do it. And she just launched into it more and more, and joined me in the journey, and believed it more when you see 1,000 other people doing really, really, really well. And we've made a lot of friends through that, and it's been great to be able to contribute to that community that we've enjoyed a lot of benefit from as well.
So you're telling me that somebody with type 1 diabetes isn't just slave to injecting themselves with insulin and just dealing with the consequences for the rest of their life?
They don't have to be, yeah. And it can be massively debilitating. I mean, she's 42 now, and she, as someone who, when I met her, she was like, oh, I don't think I'll live past 50 because that's the prognosis. But now it's like, the sky's the limit at the moment, which is really, really encouraging, yeah.
That's amazing.
Awesome.
That's amazing. So I'm sure there's somebody out there listening to our show right now that knows somebody who's dealing with it. I don't remember what the stats are, but in the United States, we even have skyrocketing numbers with type 2 diabetics in the adolescent age, childhood age. If I remember correctly, the stats of type 2 diabetics are like 1 in 5 now in the United States, 1 in 8 maybe, far more than it used to be. And, type 2 diabetes is definitely manageable. Type 1, I think, is new news for a lot of people. Because, it's the hereditary. I think people have just kind of rested on the fact that it's hereditary and there's not much you can do about it. So that's incredibly hopeful for, a lot of people that maybe don't think it has anything to do with their lifestyle.
Yeah. I suppose to add on to that, though, that, keto and low carb and eating fat bombs, I found through, trial and error, my own errors, it's not the be all and end all for everybody, and keeping insulin low. Insulin is a two-edged sword, and the more body fat you have, the more insulin you need to produce to hold back that body fat and storage. So to just load up with fat bombs was the other end of this, the edge of the thing. So taking, the journey with ketogains and that sort of crowd, and understanding that, if your goal is fat loss, then just trying to stabilize blood sugar is not ideal. So there's sort of been where I mentioned earlier, a bit of a differentiation between what's your goal and then how do you dial in your nutrition for that. And, you can do it to the nth degree, or you can give people food lists and meal lists of meals that will suit that bucket, we call it, that will suit a particular individual with their individual goals. So, yeah.
And I know that's why you created the website. And so let's talk about that itself. So when somebody gets into the Nutrient Optimizer, they're going to go in, they're going to start a profile.
Yep.
And what happens from there?
Yeah, I suppose there's an optimizingnutrition.com website, which is where I've, developed my ideas and sort of put them out there, basically trying to get feedback and spread the word and get the ideas out there. And they're the long form blog posts that go into a fair bit of detail, but then we've tried to develop the Nutrient Optimizer, which is a tool that you jump in there and you can do a free report which gives you your macro ranges, so your minimum protein and potentially upper limit of carbs and fat. Gives you, hey, based on your current eating pattern, these are the nutrients you're probably not getting enough of, and here are the foods that will then complement that and the meals that will complement that. So we give people a starting point on that journey. And then in the background, we've run a couple of challenges so far where we did a weight loss challenge in January and a nutrient density challenge in May, where we gave people the full-blown tool, which is this massive suite of nutritional tools that we've developed that just guide people through the implementation of that together with Chronometer to help them optimize nutrition from a bottom-up level based on the micronutrient density.
And right now, I think I saw on your website recently that you've collected over 600,000 daily food logs.
Yeah, we came across, there's two sets of data. One was MyFitnessPal, where we got this database of 500,000 MyFitnessPal food logs that enabled us to dig into satiety to look at what it is about food, different parameters of food, protein, fat, carbs, salt was what we're able to get out of that to say what helps people to dial in how much they eat, and you can quantify satiety. So for someone trying to eat less, they can do this, and for someone trying to eat more, they can manipulate their diet like this. But then with all the people uploading their data from Chronometer, which tracks micronutrients, we've got 25,000 days worth of people, a whole 8,000 people tracking their micronutrients, which then enables us to look at which micronutrients tend to be related to eating more or eating less. So yeah, that's just, I'm really thrilled about that, to be able to dig into that and say, okay, it's potassium, magnesium, sodium, cholesterol help you to actually be satisfied more with the food you eat and tend to eat less. So I think that's the next frontier in nutrition, to dial in your micronutrient density to help you be more satisfied with the food you eat, so you don't need more to get the protein and potassium and sodium that you need from the food you're eating.
Yeah, and I think the school of thought out there, at least over the last couple decades, has been, as long as it fits your macros, bro, yeah. Or, go keto, or, it's all been macros for the last 20 years or so, yeah. At least as far as popular culture goes. So
yeah, totally.
I know, although this might sound like common sense, like the foods that you eat matters, but this is revolutionary news to some people.
Yeah, I'm completely thrilled. I suppose on the good thing about if it fits your macros, it gives you a minimum protein target about 25%. So for most people, if they're getting 25% of calories from protein versus the 12%, which is average, that's going to be a massive improvement in satiety. And when it comes to keto, it gets you out of that gray zone of carb plus fat that we've found that, a low protein plus moderate carb and moderate fat together is just the formula for hyper-palatable autumnal foods that drive you to eat more and just gorge. So if you can reverse engineer that, you get out of that gray zone. So I think that's where keto low carb works for a lot of people. They get out of that middle zone, but then they often swing to the other end where, the more fat you eat, that sounds really seductive to say just eat fat to satiety, but fat and satiety are, once you separate fat from protein, is an oxymoron. You're drinking your olive oil and butter and MCT oil in hopes of losing body fat is a fool's errand, effectively.
What's the biggest pitfall, or maybe that's it? What's the biggest pitfall with keto? Yeah. Because I know keto is being, that's the hot stuff right now. And
yeah,
what's the biggest pitfall there?
Our analysis showed that once you get more than 50, 60% of your calories from fat, you start to find it easier to overeat. So which is fine if you're an athlete. If you're doing a lot of activity, you need energy from somewhere. So a very high satiety, high nutrient density diet will drive you to eat less, and you won't be able to overeat. And for someone like myself trying to lift weights regularly, and for someone who's very active, you need to get your energy from somewhere. So you don't want to have a super satiating, super nutrient dense diet all the time, because you need enough energy to recover. But a lot of people just have this magical belief in high fat and ketones will make them lose weight. And if I just chug the butter and MCT oil and exogenous ketones and drive my ketones high enough, I'll be losing weight because I've got ketones. But that's probably the big pitfall there, is that just because you've jammed a whole lot of extra energy into your system from all those different energy sources, you're not going to lose it from your body fat. It's really working it the other way. And a lot of people, the more we've gone into keto, you find even the Ritter work, their ketones went from like 0.5 up, 0.3 initially, up to 0.6, and then a few months later they were back at 0.5, and they've stayed at 0.5 in the 2-year follow-up. And we see that more and more people adapt to a keto diet. They oxidize fat more efficiently, and they drop their ketones, and the body learns to use ketones efficiently and effectively. So chasing that number on the ketone stick or the blood ketones is just probably a waste of time and a real distraction for most people. I think you'll find once you start to lose weight, you'll up your ketones, and then your body goes, "Oh, I know what to do with this," and you'll burn it. You'll be satiated, but you don't need to keep chasing the number on the stick. And probably the blood sugar is probably a much more useful indicator of your energy status, and maybe blood sugar and ketones together. If you can bring that, we call it the total energy, back further down towards 6, 5, even 4. If your addition of your blood sugar and ketones together is really low, you're going to be losing weight because you've got such a low amount of energy in your bloodstream, and you'll have to use your body fat.
Well, is there a difference between what you've seen between the keto you're describing and then also supplementing electrolytes along with that? Because I noticed that you mentioned potassium as one major player. And
definitely.
Is that kind of a key player there? So if somebody's doing keto and they're hitting maybe some of these symptoms that you're talking about, is that a big issue?
Yeah, I mean, keto flu is really just electrolyte depletion generally in the early stages of a keto diet, because you're cutting out carbohydrates, and people think, I need to cut my carbs right down, so I cut out all vegetable matter, and all of a sudden they've got no electrolytes from potassium, magnesium, sodium, calcium, which are really the big ones. Vitamins and minerals are much smaller and typically easier to get in adequate quantities. It's typically the potassium, magnesium, as I said, calcium, the big players. And amazingly, in the recent analysis of the chronometer data, the effect of potassium, people are obviously just really low in potassium in the default diet. They say, I think about 2% of people are naturally getting enough potassium in their default diet. So the more foods you eat that contain potassium, you get this massive reaction to satiety as you improve that. But we don't seem to have a real strong taste for potassium like we do for sodium. So the food manufacturers never really put it in food. We just get it from green leafy veggies, which are often, not often consumed, and especially by the carnivore tribe, which is another, fad diet type approach that works for a lot of people. But it's interesting out there, and trying to navigate. I'm trying to move on from belief in a named diet or people believe rather than deities in diets now. They have this magical attribution of the ability of diet to save me if I'm part of this group or that group or whatever you want to call your diet. But, we can move on beyond that to actually look at the things that actually change how much we eat and how satiated we are, and what helps us, feed our mitochondria and, build muscle and lose fat. So, hopefully hoping to be part of an exciting new phase in nutrition.
Well, one thing I've really appreciated about your approach, and I will say, I have to admit that a bias interview is not always the most fun interview to listen to.
Be devil's advocate.
Yeah, because I'm already a big advocate of what you do. But I will say that the reason why I really wanted you to come on the show. And the reason why I wanted to talk to you and the reason I'm a big fan of what you're doing is that you've always had this approach of, at least the tone of your content is, I collected some data. This is what I found. And this is, this is what I'm seeing.
Yeah.
And rather than opinion first. And so if anybody's going to your blog, they are going to see a lot of charts. They are going to see a lot of line graphs. And based on what you've seen, what are some of the most common problems coming through? Or I shouldn't say most common problems coming through, but what are you seeing as far as the surprises over the last 5 years in your observations? What have you learned the most, the things that stick out the most in your observation of the way people eat?
Yeah, I suppose people's approach to nutrition, like I was sort of inferring before, is really often based on, I'm plant-based, I'm vegan, or I'm carnivore, I'm keto. And like the amazing thing that all of those approaches that work, if you're extreme enough, what they exclude is, refined flours, really refined isolated sugars, and refined vegetable oils. And the more I've dug into that area, you just see that, back in 1910, we learned to extract vegetable oils using solvates from soybeans, canola, rapeseed. And then in 1930s, we learned to harness nitrogen and inject it in through fertilizers into our crops. So all of a sudden, we didn't need to rest our soils, involve animals in the development and fertilization of those soils, and we can just keep grinding that same plot over and over and over again. So you get this really nutrient depleted soil that's fueled with, refined fat, just chemical fertilizers that grows crops really quickly and then grows humans really quickly. And then we've managed to smash the refined starch and refined oils together into mass processed food that is just the ultimate grow food for humans, but mimics the autumnal foods that are really available in a short period of time each year to help us get fat in preparation for winter. So if there was one thing you'd say to people, what's the one thing you should do is next time you go to the shops, don't put anything in your shopping cart that contains some sort of combination of refined starch, refined oil that has a whole lot of colors and flavors to make it look nutritious, because, it's not, and it's not going to help you. So, the problem is you'll be left going, what can I put in my shopping cart? Everything in the shops is full of this stuff. And that's our problem. We've got to find a way to, I suppose the Nutrient Optimizer hopes to cut through the BS to say, I know the marketing says it's this, this, and this, and this, but, what actual micronutrients does that contain that you need? And, help you isolate and identify foods that will help you thrive.
Well, and if I'm shopping and I put I get a box and it says fortified with vitamin A, fortified with vitamin E. There is an element, reading through some research myself, there's an element of when you supplement a nutrient or it's fortified into another food that doesn't typically take it, there's research to show that you don't always see the nutrient status in the body actually change. And sometimes that has to do with like enzymes in food, bacteria, a little bit of magic that we just don't understand about organic matter. Do you have any insight into that as to why, real food and the nutrient status of real food will typically prove to be better than that in processed food fortified with vitamins and fascinating area that I've been trying to dig into and understand more myself recently. But wow. So I think at a fundamental level, you've got the animal digestion that then produces manure that goes into the soil and makes the soil this thriving ecosystem that goes into the plant that then goes into your stomach. And all those things sort of come into you that aren't contained when your food is just this developed mainly from chemical fertilizers with a bunch of fortified supplements on top of that. But then,
everything is so synergistic that it's not just the one nutrient, it's not just the B9 or the B12 or the vitamin A. It's all of those nutrients working together synergistically. And, so much of the time, it seems to be the foods, that's the whole foods that really provide the benefit rather than just one isolated supplement. And, if you've got, you take all these calcium supplements, but you don't have the vitamin D from the sun that you need, you're not going to put them in the right place. They're not going to go to your bones. They're going to go into your cause atherosclerosis from building up in your blood vessels. And there's all these sort of examples. If you take 2 tablespoons of salt that might be what you need from your food each day, you're going to be running straight to the bathroom because it just goes straight through. And all these minerals aren't, your body's not used to absorbing this massive dump of minerals into your gut that you tend to see in fortified foods or the supplements. And if there's stories of you overdrive the folate pathway and your folic acid is not the same as your folate that's found in real food, and that can mask B12 deficiencies and all these sorts of things. And so many stories of getting your nutrients from whole real food is the first point of call. Maybe if you want to top up a little bit to reach the RDAs or optimal levels, which are typically a good chunk higher, go for it. But you've really got to make an effort if you want to see real health improvements to get your nutrients from real whole food that were ideally grown in a more traditional way. Not just mass farmed, mass cropped with heavy reliance on chemical fertilizers.
Very nice.
Which is really hard these days.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Everything is processed that we get in stores. So now with your website and all the people that you've, that have gone on your website and done the Nutrient Optimizer, what are some of the results that you're seeing from these people? Like, after they put in everything, like, what are their comments back to you? What are some of the results that you're seeing?
Yeah, it has honestly been a thrill just to see that the challenges and people really thriving with it. We did one in January where we focused on weight loss because everybody's into that, and diabetes management, and their blood sugars came down. I forget what the rate of weight loss was, but it was like 1.5% a week of weight loss if you dial it all in. Wow. But it's not just it's the lack of cravings and the energy levels that you seem to see once you focus on nutrient density and satiety. If you can actually quantify the satiety of your food and say, well, these are the meals that will work best if you're trying to maximize satiety. That was what we saw in the January one, and people were just not hungry, and they had their breakfast, had their omelette or whatever they had, and not hungry till way later in the afternoon, and they're just going, this is different for me. This is really radically different and new, and I'm losing weight with lots of energy. And I suppose that was the important thing. Once you get the nutrients in your food, your body, I think restricting calories just through sheer willpower and tracking and weighing is one thing, but to prioritize nutrient density, you give your body what it needs, and your body goes, okay, I've got enough food, I've got the energy, I've got the nutrients I need, I'm not going to crave more. I think you seem to get much less metabolic slowdown in that process, and your body isn't craving and crying out for more nutrients. It says, well, I've got the nutrients I need from the food, and I've got the energy I need from the fat on my body. I'm good, thanks very much. And once we saw people dial in their micronutrient profile, that was really amazing too, because we said, okay, on the second challenge, we don't want people to worry about tracking calories. We just want to track your micronutrient status. And again, it was like incredibly satiated. Got to a point where they're getting down to 1,800 calories just because they couldn't get this food in because it was so bulky and satiating, and their appetite was really low and the energy levels were still very high, which was just a real thrill. And I suppose that's the extreme, and for most people are going to find that balance point of, let's get that nutrition, the nutrient density in as that first fundamental cornerstone, that building block, and then sure, let's get your carbs and fat in there to balance that, to get the nutrition you need, to the energy you need to give you the energy you need not to lose too much weight, and to to perform your CrossFit workout or your workout that you need to achieve for. Awesome. So very, very exciting things in real life, and it was a real buzz to see, the theory come out in practice.
Yeah, that's awesome. And there's so much on your site for free. I mean, if I start a profile, I can enter all of my, like, everything that I'm already eating. One thing I think that's a big benefit of Nutrient Optimizer versus USDA is that USDA has a lot of information on like dietary habits of Americans in certain decades, but a lot of it is survey based. A lot of it's recollection survey based. Your data is direct input. And now I do want to play a little bit of devil's advocate here. So I admit this is going to be maybe a difficult question to answer, but how would you answer this question? How can I trust that a computer can tell me what to eat, especially a computer in the future?
I think our servers are in Atlanta, so it's okay. But, okay. You're all good. End of story.
Okay, well, I trust it. You don't need to answer it anymore.
Yeah, all good. I suppose what we're doing is working out what works for most people most of the time. And, everybody thinks they're a delicate petal and a unique snowflake, but, most of us aren't really as special as and unique as we think we are. So we've just tried to work out what works for most people most of the time, but then segment them up into different populations, not just go, everybody should go keto, everybody should go paleo, everybody should just do nutrient density. It's like, hey, what is your goal? And if your goal is lean bulking, then what are the foods that will help you do that to gain more muscle without too much fat? And if you're trying to balance your blood sugar, what are the, how do you manipulate the insulin out of your diet without neglecting nutrient density too much, which is sort of a low carb keto approach. So it's what we've shown with two major databases from 500,000 days of MyFitnessPal data and 25,000 days of chronometer data of what works for most people most of the time. And in short, maybe you're practicing a vegan diet and you're getting a lot of plant-based materials in, and you may not be as potassium deficient as most people, but and context does matter and your activity levels do matter, but we've defined what works for most people most of the time, and there will be some variation within that because you are unique to some degree, but that's where we allow you to track your diet and say, what are you actually getting, and what are the foods and what are the micronutrients you're not getting enough of at the moment, and therefore what foods and meals will help you fill those micronutrient gaps. And to me, that's just, that's what nutrition should be, but somehow it's a new concept and I want to be part of getting it out there.
So is it of your opinion that people should be focusing mostly on micronutrients rather than macronutrients? Is there a hierarchy there, or is it still just kind of even across the field? I'm just interested to hear your take based on the data you've seen.
Yeah, all of the above, I think. One thing we have found up to about 45-50% protein, micronutrient density is correlated with more protein. So, and the reality is if you try to eat 50% of your diet from protein, it's very, 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 very hard to maintain. So within any reasonable range, more protein tends to correlate with better micronutrient density, even if you're not trying to worry. We only score based on the harder to find nutrients, which typically not the amino acids. So it's more protein tends to correlate with more vitamins and minerals and essential fatty acids that most people find harder to obtain. So macronutrients are important in that regard, and balancing your blood sugars by manipulating how much carbohydrates you're eating. So if your blood sugars are high, you're a diabetic, you need to titrate that down. But then the next step is to dial in your micronutrient density, which continue to take you a lot further down that track than just tracking calories. and it seems to just make a more sustainable, healthy diet. You can, like as you're inferring before, if you just go, if it fits your macros, you can create a fantastically nutritious, healthy diet with that, or you can create complete pus that, you know, the manufacturers can fit their the thing they want to sell you within that parameter. But if you say, you know, show me the micronutrients from the food without the fortification, it's much harder to get through that criteria to sell you crap and hoodwink you to buy things that aren't actually going to be healthy for you.
Well, I read a book called The Dorito Effect, and
I love that.
It's a beautiful book because it talks about the first thing we tried to make. One thing tastes like another thing. We made a chip taste like a taco. And yeah, I remember a specific study that they cited in there. You'll remember it. It was when they took, I think, a bunch of goats, and they had a bunch of roughage that they made phosphorus deficient, and they had them eat it for a period of time, and then they kept eating it. It was typically has phosphorus in it, and they took it out somehow, and they had them eat it. And then the amount of this roughage they ate increased threefold. And then they gave them some more roughage that had a natural phosphorus status, and they maintained the overeating pattern because and the theory was that their appetite increased as nutrient status decreased. Because even though they ate the same amount, the brain was still able, at least that was the theory, the brain was still able to detect it. You would eat it, you would expect that nutrient, and then when it wasn't there, the brain was still able to signal, eat more. And it wasn't about the quantity and the fullness and the actual volume of food. It was about the nutrient status and the expectation. So the theory is that if you eat a taco-flavored Dorito, and your brain is expecting meat, tomato, sour cream, stuff like that, and you just eat this seasoning mix instead, your brain eats it, and there's a good volume of food. It might be 500 calories worth of chips, and then your brain says, I'm still not getting that lycopene and all this stuff I'm expecting from the taco. Keep eating. Do you feel like, I guess the follow-up there, and I'm getting this from you, and I just wonder if you can elaborate, is that when your nutrient status is optimal or better, that the neurology of appetite begins to change, and then the macros can tend to work out for themselves. You can start trusting your appetite for certain you can find your own macro ratios that you like when your appetite is regulated, but it can't be unless your nutrient status is optimal. I know that's a really long thought, but is that kind of the way that you're seeing it work?
You said it well. Yeah, the whole Dorito effect thing is fantastic. Ted Naiman, a friend of mine, raves on about the protein leverage hypothesis, and there really does seem to be a similar sort of thing going on with the nutrient leverage hypothesis, where we continue to eat enough food until we get the nutrients we need as well as the protein. And I think from Stephan Guyenet talks about the hungry brain and how it's all happening in the brain. But to go back a step further, you've got to think that, you know, from an evolutionary historical point of view, that the brain would have said, okay, I need protein, and I survive better when I get the protein I need, so I'm going to get a dopamine hit for getting that protein. And similarly, you'd get the dopamine hit for potassium and sodium and magnesium and everything else to some degree, but just influenced by the availability of those nutrients in the default food system and how much you're currently getting. So, you know, when you're eating salt, once you get enough salt and the body's replete with salt, you don't need any more. So you don't. Sorry, the sun just came in to say hi.
No problem. I can make a cut right here, and then
So once you've got enough sodium in your body, you get a real strong taste for sodium, and it doesn't taste good anymore. But up until about 4 or 5 grams of sodium a day, you you still have an appetite for sodium, and it drives you to eat more of those foods that contain a moderate amount of sodium. So, and that seems to be happening throughout the whole food system, that you continue to crave foods until you get it. But like they talk about in the Dorito effect, all the nutrients in food, the smells, put out a sense of that they're based on the different vitamins and minerals and amino acids in those foods, and they drive you to crave those things. But then we came up with the gas chromatograph that said, okay, we can mimic that, we can copy that flavor and put it into food, because our food no longer actually contains those nutrients, because, as I said before, we've worked out how to use all these fertilizers to grow crops quickly and for size and productivity and profit, but they no longer contain the flavor you need in them naturally, because they don't contain the nutrients. So the hacking flavor is just an incredible risk nutritionally that we no longer can trust and associate the how food tastes with how good it is actually for us. So I suppose that's where, looking from a micronutrient density point of view, you can then say, does it really contain the things we need in those foods, beyond what it tastes like? So, I mean, the whole Beyond Burger and fake meat thing recently, everything I've read, just so you know, it tastes okay. And it tastes okay because they've had teams of scientists working for decades to try and mimic the taste of meat with synthetic. It tastes good because it's got the nutritional yeast and monosodium glutamate in there, and a whole lot of artificial, they call them natural flavors, but they're just artificial flavors. But once we start hacking our flavor sensation that has evolved to tell us what foods are actually good for us, we're in a lot of trouble.
It's kind of like a form of mind control, kind of like when Marty just stuck out his hand and just did a Jedi mind control to his son.
Stop.
Yeah, he's a Jedi master. Yeah. Not only does he live in the future and know everything that's going to happen to us, but he can also control it.
You think it happens regularly?
It's like a laser just stopped him in his tracks. As two fathers, we can really appreciate that, and we need to spend a lot of extra time with you.
I can teach you the skills.
Over time. We will be patient.
Quick question: with a lot of the data you've been collecting, have you found out that a lot of whatever's being said in society or on TV, like nutrient deficiencies will happen because of that, like salt? Like a lot of people are probably not, like salt isn't, like the sodium isn't as bad for you as a lot of people think, unless you have certain issues, right? But salt's bad for you. So, people are probably under eating their sodium and everything like that. And then with the sodium and iodine, like then is their iodine, like the iodized salt, like then is their iodine low, which then has other issues and stuff like that. So is it like very social media, like big stream media, like based with a lot of like the deficiencies that you've seen, or is it kind of all over the map?
Yeah, you can get into wonderful conspiracy theories. And going back, you look at the way our food system has become much more agricultural based, more and more with, it's very cost effective to use the chemical fertilizers, which I'm completely recently came across a book, Prophets and Wizards, that goes through, the impact of chemical fertilizers, that completely blew my mind of how impactful that was. But that was back in the 1930s. But food just became so much easier to produce quickly using that technology. Ever since then, our whole messaging from the US Department of Agriculture, whose mission it is to promote the foods of agriculture that America produces.
That's in the mission. You're right.
That is their mission. As much as I use all their data in my analysis, but that is their mission, to promote the foods of agriculture. There's been a departure in the messaging away from whole foods and animal-based foods. And, the 1977 USDA guidelines that started to say cholesterol is bad and fat is bad and saturated fat is bad sort of precipitated that and accelerated that. And from that point, with the micronutrient density, you see vitamin A dropping and B12 dropping around that point where they created this fear around animal-based foods. And one thing with the chronometer data, you see that there is like potassium's number one as far as the micronutrients. Cholesterol is number two in terms of our appetite for cholesterol. We really go ballistic for foods that contain more cholesterol up to a point, and then it flattens out. So it seems that we're all cholesterol deficient dietarily, that if we ate more foods that contain cholesterol, we'd be more satiated and eat less. And, that's not the same for all fat. As I said before, beyond about 60% fat, it starts to rocket up. But it seems we need more cholesterol. I can't mimic the same thing for omega-3 because we're probably getting enough omega-3 and heaps of omega-6 in our diet with all the seed oils. But cholesterol, vitamin A, B12, all those sort of things seem to have plummeted as a result of that messaging of an anti-animal based thing. But we see people are craving them as they get more of them. They're satiated and they don't need to eat as much, which I think is really important.
Mm-hmm.
What's a major change that you've made personally since you've started this? How do you use the Nutrient Optimizer and the information that you're seeing? Or are you just a pizza and wings guy still, stays 6% body fat? No bigot.
Stay at home and eat donuts and pizza. No, it's really hard to live in the real world and go to the markets and shop. And we as a family, we invest a lot of our money in food for 14 and 15-year-old kids and the wife and
who don't care about graphs, and 14 and 15-year-old kids are not big fans of data.
Well, my son is a bit of a data nerd, amazingly. He's trying to do artificial intelligence programming, all this wacky stuff that's way above my head. And I go, I can see so much of myself in you. But
probably harder to mind control him. That one gives you a little kickback.
But anyway, no, they've grown up in the middle of it all, so it's been interesting. But they really notice the difference between what they eat at home and what the other people eat. And occasionally we have indulgences to make ourselves look normal, and we don't always be completely zealous about it all. But definitely. I try to prioritize protein as much as I can in my life. To maximize satiety. We get kangaroo over here, and I'm a sucker for kangaroo, which is really nutrient dense and high protein. As much as veggies and everything as I can. A good chunk of spinach, but not too much, because spinach is not the only thing, and you get oxalate issues to some degree, and you can only handle so much spinach, so you need to rotate your veggies. I came across crocodile the other day, which is completely fascinating, and you dive into the nutrient density of this, effectively an apex predator, and the nutrient density is completely off the chart. And you go, okay, I understand how it works here. It's that these you can understand how wild animals in the past would have been incredibly nutrient dense, and we wouldn't have to have worried about any of this micronutrient density stuff. So, it's a daily thing, and I try to live it as much as I can, and while I'm trying to maintain a day job and a pretty full-on hobby all at the same time.
Do you ever feel starstruck when you see a really nutrient-dense food that you've always wanted to see? Like, I've seen you on my lists, watercress, and I finally to meet you.
Well, that was what I felt with the crocodile. I went, wow, I don't know if it's the seeing the nutrient density, but it tastes so good, and I feel so good, and I feel so happy after I had this crocodile. This is incredible. So anyway, it's not cheap and hard to get. I'm not sure whether we can all live on crocodile sustainably for the rest of eternity, but anyway.
Have you noticed any difference with your kids since you started this lifestyle change in your household, grade-wise, or attention deficit disorder, anything, if they had anything? Or
great question. The daughter used to be a lot she was a bit of a moody, angry kid until we got her off grains, and she really settled down, and she had really bad gut pain. I think just the autoimmune thing flows in the family. And the son definitely goes, food colorings and flavorings. He definitely responds to those. So if we try to keep those out of his life, he'll just sit down with a block of cheese and hammer through it as a pre-breakfast snack these days. You go, what are you eating? You're eating so much. But that's the other thing. You've got to work out, how do you feed these kids in a healthy way? Because you can't go, all you can eat is the spinach and watercress and kangaroo, because that they're growing and they're growing really quickly. So it's just the differentiation of nutrient density nutrition for different people with different goals is fascinating. Even with my own family, between myself who's trying to get stronger and stay lean, and the wife with diabetes, and the kids who are growing like weeds. So yeah,
that's cool.
Would you consider yourself a foodie? Because I know not everyone that's into nutrition is also into food. Like the higher quality 5-star. Are you a big cook, or are you just kind of a basic, like you're in college? And like we ask each other this kind of stuff all the time. That I'm very into the biochemistry stuff, and I wasn't in high school, but now I am, because I can see the reasoning and rationale behind it. But there is part of me, there's 10% of me that's man's versus food. Like I like a good challenge.
Yeah.
And are you a foodie? Do you like food challenge? Are you kind of a man versus food guy, or do you have a pretty low key, even consistent diet?
Yeah. The wife is a great cook, so together we're great. I tell her, cook by the numbers, and she creates amazing food for the family. If it was me, I'd just be going, here's your protein powder and kangaroo and spinach, and that'll be all you need. I'm much simpler when it comes to that, and I find simplicity. You get I talk about sensory specific satiety. If you're eating a whole variety of things all the time, it's just there's that coloured cookie and there's that flavoured cookie, and you just keep on having to try everything and eat more and more things. So the simpler you can eat, most of the time the better. But yeah, definitely need to enjoy food, and good food should taste good, and unfortunately most of our food doesn't taste good without a bit of help from all the flavorings and colorings we were talking about before.
Yeah, and there's definitely a social aspect of food that we can't forget. That we can get heavy into the nutrition, and I think it's extraordinarily important. But there's, I think, 2 really good rules. I can't remember where I heard this. Maybe I made it up, but the 2 really good rules with diet was eat food that doesn't hurt you, and don't be weird.
Don't be weird.
Yeah.
I like that. I like don't be evil, don't be weird. But I think that the quality of what you're eating is worth investing in, and food that is nutritious will taste amazing. And we went down to a winery. The wife wanted to do a winery tour last weekend, and the first one we stopped at 11 o'clock in the morning tasting wines. It was quite a weird experience. We got on bikes and rode around, but the one that completely blew our mind was this. It had been grown with 60-year-old vines with no irrigation on volcanic soil, and the roots had to go all the way down, and the nutrients it sucked up, it was just amazing taste, and it just completely blew your mind that that these natural, the synthetic flavors and colorings could never mimic. So it's like, okay, now I understand nutrition in a whole new way, because these wine vines, these grapevines, are sucking up all this amazing nutrition and making these things taste completely off the chart. So you can't really synthetically copy incredible nutrition. You have to go out of your way to find good food and buy it.
Yeah. The 5-star food that I was quoting, you'll never find a 5-star chef using synthetic stuff. It's
totally.
all whole food. Yeah,
Let's put in more color. Let's put in more colors and the sauce, and it doesn't happen that way. It's the natural ingredients that taste amazing.
Yeah.
So what barriers have you set up for yourself to prevent burnout in this? Because you've been working hard, and like the website and everything, and just keep adding on. So what did you put in place in your life, like some guardrails to make sure you don't go careening off the road?
I've been tracking heart rate variability for a while. which has been fascinating. And recently got the Aura Ring, which I've been trying to tame, and it confuses the hell out of me, and it's really challenging. And I'll get in and do a heavy workout because I really want to work out. So I'll lift heavy, but then the heart rate will be elevated overnight, and then you get hungry, so you'll eat more at night. So then the next morning you wake up going, I'm really, I ate too much, you need to go work out again. So it's this cycle, and then you don't sleep as well. And so yeah, it's definitely a challenge. I suppose just finding that place to back off and not always be going full on. Yeah, but at the same time, the whole nutrition thing is my hobby, and it's sort of like the balance between the day job and I have a lot of fun doing nutrition. But I think if I did the nutrition thing full time, it would become my job and a whole lot more stressful and not as much fun. So they sort of balance each other out, and just make sure I get time to be active and go for a walk with the dog and the wife to the park and see sun. And at lunchtime, I've got into a habit of getting out and going for a walk around the city for an hour, listening to podcasts, and just making sure I'm active and seeing the sun. I think that's the biggest challenge for me, is trying to get that the cycle, managing sleep through getting adequate light during the day, not always looking at blue light, and not always being overstimulated with caffeine and the like, which I really enjoy. That's my jam. If I have a choice, I'll go the caffeine rather than the alcohol. But being able to find downtime and sleep and rest in all that as well, and not burning out. And I'm trying to get to a point where I can take a bit more time off to invest in this, to make it more mainstream, because it just seems to be a waste if I got 10 years down the track and I didn't get this out to more people. So trying to continue to refine the message and simplify it and get it out to more people.
Well, any way we can be a part of that, we're very happy to help in any way.
Thank you. Appreciate. I love it when people like you guys, I've never interacted with, I don't think, on Facebook too much, and not part of the community as such, but I've obviously read stuff and gone, I get it, I understand it, I see why this is important, and interact on a meaningful level. And that's the biggest thrill and compliment, that it obviously resonates with people. That's a real buzz. So thank you.
Well, I want to ask you one more question, then I'm going to let you go. And this is one we ask all guests. So if you don't have a particular answer, I didn't ask you this one before, and because I want an honest answer. And if you don't have one, that's totally fine too. But given the fact that you are somebody that's obviously very dedicated to what you do, motivation's not an issue. You're very curious. Seems like you're doing a lot of the right things, and you're a family man. Responsibilities are at an all-time high probably in your life right now. What is one tradition that you have with your family, or one thing that you found that you do with your family that has made the quality of life in your family better? Whether that's, we always go for a walk, we always sit down at the dinner table, I don't see them at all. I don't know what's the answer for you in the Kendall family. What's one thing you guys have going?
You give them high-speed internet, and we're all happy. Just
that's the secret to happiness.
but if the internet goes out, they all come out of the room.
Who are you people? Why is that?
Who are you?
How did these kids end up in my house?
But slightly more seriously, walk with the family and the dog in the park. With not the mainly the wife. The kids don't come for walks with us anymore. We often go to the markets on the weekend and get good food, and have a Saturday night or a Sunday night dinner that's like, oh wow, this food is amazing, and really enjoy the good food. And we've always done this cuddle regime that the kids jump into bed and we have a bit of a chat at night, and the daughter at 15 still does that and loves to come in and blah 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 and chat. And that's really a really nice tradition, I think, to they still want to do that and still have a chat and share their day and download, and that's really therapeutic. And and usually sends me off to sleep quite effectively as well. So really, but I do really enjoy that, and having that relationship is really important. So,
yeah, sense of security, sense of it's just very comforting when people can actually still interact face to face now.
Yeah,
very cool, very cool. Well, I can't thank you enough. I'm going to send you a follow-up email on this any way that we can be a part of Nutrient Optimizer going forward. I'm using it with my clients right now, and it's my hope that there are some people listening. We'll share it with all of our groups. I want you to share it with yours, and I hope there's more people we can reach that can get involved in everything that you're doing, and I know it can help in a big way.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. So what's, real quick, what's next challenge for the Nutrient Optimizer group? You did fat loss, you did the nutrition density.
Yeah, well, I suppose the next challenge I'm going through, I've looked at all the different micronutrients, vitamins, minerals, amino acids, and doing a bit of a dump on that to teach people on why that's important. Going through all the different conditions of, PMS, fibromyalgia, all these different sort of conditions and how different nutrients can help, and then designing food lists and meal lists and recipes and a bit of a protocol that can help people work through those issues with nutrition from a very, I'm very new to this, and I'm just dipping my toe in before they dive fully into the Nutrient Optimizer, into the deep end, to once they're sold out to optimize their micronutrient level to the nth degree. So we're just trying to develop that funnel from one end to the other to help people go through that process. So yeah, hopefully that'll be the next thing we roll out, and then we can make it, put a price tag on it. At the moment, it's all being free, and then I can devote even more time to it, which would be great.
Yeah, awesome.
That's fantastic. Well, this has been the Inward Investing Podcast. I'm Mike Ritter.
I'm Todd Whelan.
And thank you very much, Marty, for your time. I'm confused. Should I tell them goodbye tomorrow? Because it is tomorrow.
Yeah. Well,
I'm going to sit and think about this.
Good yesterday to us, and we have to say good tomorrow to him.
My mind just blew up. Thank you.